The drive to Lubbock on Saturday morning was quiet, but it was the comfortable kind of quiet that comes when everyone is focused on the same goal. Sarah sat between her parents in the front seat of Miguel's truck, while Jake followed behind them in his own vehicle, which Miguel had helped him tune up during the week. Sarah had been awake since 5 in the morning, too excited to sleep. She had checked and rechecked her gear 3 times, practiced her knots until her fingers moved automatically, and eaten the hearty breakfast Elena insisted would give her strength for the competition. "Remember what Jake taught you about breathing," Elena reminded her daughter as they pulled into the rodeo grounds. "Deep breaths when you feel nervous." The youth rodeo was already bustling with activity when they arrived. Kids ranging from 6 to 17 were everywhere, some confidently warming up their horses, while others looked as nervous as Sarah felt. Parents and coaches moved around with the organized chaos that comes with any youth sporting event. Jake parked next to the Martinez family truck and walked over to help unload Sarah's gear. He was dressed in his competition clothes, looking every inch the professional cowboy, but his focus was entirely on his young student. "How are we feeling?" Jake asked Sarah as she climbed out of the truck. "My stomach feels funny," Sarah admitted. "But you said that was normal, right?" "Completely normal," Jake assured her. "That means your body is getting ready to perform. We just need to use that energy in the right way." They walked toward the registration area, passing groups of other competitors and their families. Jake noticed several people looking at Sarah with curiosity. She was smaller than most of the other kids in her age group, and she was clearly a first-time competitor based on her new gear and wide-eyed expression. "Don't worry about anyone else," Jake said quietly. "Focus on what you can control, which is your own performance." While Miguel and Elena handled the registration paperwork, Jake took Sarah to look at the competition arena. It was smaller than the main rodeo arena they had attended the week before, but it still looked enormous to an 8-year-old competing for the first time. "It looks different than our practice area," Sarah observed. "The principles are exactly the same," Jake reminded her. "You've been practicing on fence posts and tires, but you're roping live calves today. The calves are actually easier targets because they move in predictable ways." Other competitors were already warming up in a practice area adjacent to the main arena. Jake watched them with the experienced eye of someone who understood the sport deeply. "That girl in the pink shirt," he said, nodding toward a competitor who appeared to be about 10 years old. "She's got good form, but she's rushing her throws. And that boy in the black hat? He's got power, but his accuracy needs work." "What about me?" Sarah asked. "What do I need to work on?" Jake looked down at her seriously. "You need to trust your training and have fun. That's it. Everything else, you already know how to do." When it was time for Sarah's age group to compete, the Martinez family found seats in the stands with a perfect view of the arena. Jake had wanted to stay with Sarah in the competitor area, but only registered coaches and family members were allowed, so he would have to watch from the stands and trust that his week of intensive training would serve her well. Sarah's event was scheduled third, which gave her time to watch the first 2 age groups compete. Jake had suggested this strategy, knowing that seeing other kids perform successfully would help build her confidence. The 6 and 7-year-olds went first, and their event was more about participation than serious competition. Most of the kids were just learning to handle their ropes, and the crowd cheered enthusiastically for every attempt, whether successful or not. The 10 to 12-year-olds followed, and the level of competition was immediately apparent. These kids had been competing for several years, and their technique was significantly more advanced. "Those kids are really good," Sarah said, watching a particularly skillful performance. "They are," Jake agreed. "But they're also older than you, and they've been competing longer. You're not competing against them today. You're competing against other 8 and 9-year-olds, and I've seen what you can do. You belong in that arena." When Sarah's age group was called to prepare, Elena hugged her daughter tightly. "Remember, Mija, we're proud of you no matter what happens out there." Miguel kissed the top of her head. "Ride your own ride, Sarah. Don't worry about anyone else." Jake knelt down so he was at eye level with Sarah. "What's the most important thing I taught you this week?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Trust my training and have fun." "That's right. Everything else is just details. You've got this, kid." As Sarah walked toward the competitor area with her rope coiled over her shoulder, Jake felt a nervous energy that he hadn't experienced since his own first competition many years ago. He realized that he was more invested in Sarah's success than he had been in his own recent performances. The 8 and 9-year-old division had 12 competitors, and Sarah had drawn the 8th position, which Jake considered ideal. She would have time to watch several other kids perform and settle her nerves, but she wouldn't have to wait so long that anxiety could build up. The first few competitors had mixed results. 2 kids missed their calves entirely. One made a solid catch, but took too long to complete the tie, and one young boy had excellent technique, but was unlucky when his calf stumbled just as he threw his rope. This is a tough group, Miguel observed. These kids are all pretty skilled. Jake nodded, but he was watching the pattern of how the calves were running. Each animal was slightly different, and understanding those differences could give Sarah an advantage. When the 6th competitor entered the arena, Jake leaned forward with increased attention. This was Madison Cooper, a 9-year-old from Oklahoma who had won several competitions already that year. She was considered the favorite to win the division. Madison's performance was technically flawless. She roped her calf cleanly, dismounted quickly, and completed her tie in excellent time. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and the announcer praised her textbook technique. "That's going to be hard to beat," Elena said quietly. "Sarah can beat it," Jake said with confidence that surprised even himself. "Madison's technique is perfect, but she's mechanical. Sarah has that natural feel that you can't teach." The 7th competitor was a local boy who clearly had home crowd support. He performed well, but not at the level that would challenge Madison's lead. Then, it was Sarah's turn. Jake watched her enter the arena on foot, carrying her rope with the same casual confidence she showed during practice. She took her position and looked up at the holding chute where her calf was waiting. "She looks calm," Miguel observed with surprise. Sarah was calm. All week, Jake had drilled into her the importance of treating competition exactly like practice. Don't change anything. Don't try to be perfect. Just do what you've done hundreds of times before. The calf burst from the chute, and Jake could immediately tell it was a good draw for Sarah. The animal was running straight and true, not trying to dodge or change direction unpredictably. Sarah built her loop with fluid motions that looked effortless. She had learned to read the calf's movement in the first few strides, timing her throw for the moment when the animal would be in the optimal position. When she released her rope, Jake knew immediately that it was a perfect throw. The loop sailed out with precisely the right trajectory and speed, settling around the calf's neck so smoothly that it looked choreographed. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Sarah was already moving to the next phase of the competition. She secured her rope quickly and efficiently, completing the tie with movements that Jake recognized from their practice sessions. When the judge signaled completion and the official time was announced, the arena fell silent for a moment. Sarah had not only made a clean catch and tie, she had done it faster than Madison Cooper. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed over the sound system. "That's a new arena record for the 8 and 9-year-old division. Sarah Martinez from Amarillo, Texas, competing in her very first rodeo." The crowd exploded into applause, and Jake found himself on his feet, cheering louder than he had for any of his own victories. Miguel and Elena were hugging each other, and even the other competitors' families were applauding Sarah's remarkable performance. But Jake's attention was focused on Sarah herself. She was standing in the center of the arena, holding her rope, and looking slightly bewildered by the noise and excitement around her. When she spotted her family in the stands, her face broke into the biggest smile Jake had ever seen. The remaining 4 competitors performed well, but none of them came close to Sarah's time. When the final scores were announced, Sarah had won the division by a margin that was impressive even for adult competition. During the award ceremony, Sarah stood on the top step of the podium wearing a champion's belt buckle that was almost comically large for her small frame. Jake watched from the stands as she waved to the crowd, and he felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that was different from anything he had experienced in his own competitive career. After the ceremony, the Martinez family made their way down to the arena area where Sarah was surrounded by other competitors, their parents, and local media representatives who wanted to interview the record-setting first-time competitor. Sarah, called a reporter from the local television station. Can you tell us how it feels to win your very first rodeo? Sarah looked around until she spotted Jake approaching through the crowd. It feels amazing, but I couldn't have done it without my coach. Jake taught me everything I know about competition roping. The reporter turned toward Jake with interest. And you are? Jake Morrison, he replied. But before he could say anything else, Sarah continued talking. Jake's the best roper I've ever seen, and he's competing tonight in the adult division. Everyone should stay and watch him, because he's going to win too. Jake felt his face redden with embarrassment, but also with a warmth that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. Sarah's complete faith in his abilities was both touching and terrifying. Well, Jake, the reporter said with a smile, sounds like you've got some big expectations to live up to tonight. How do you feel about competing after coaching such a successful student? Jake looked at Sarah, who was beaming up at him with absolute confidence, and he felt something shift inside him. For months, he had been carrying the weight of his family's financial struggles and his own performance disappointments. But watching Sarah succeed had reminded him why he had fallen in love with rodeo in the first place. I feel like I remember what this sport is really about, Jake said honestly. It's not just about winning prize money or proving anything to anybody. It's about doing your best and enjoying the challenge. As the crowd began to disperse and prepare for the afternoon break before the adult competition, the Martinez family gathered around Sarah to celebrate her victory. I can't believe I won, Sarah said for the 10th time, still holding her champion's belt buckle. And I set a record. We're so proud of you, Mija, Elena said, hugging her daughter. You were incredible out there. Miguel shook Jake's hand firmly. Thank you. What you did for our daughter this week. There's no way we can repay that. You already have, Jake replied. Your family saved me from giving up on something I love. Sarah reminded me why I started doing this in the first place. As they walked toward the concession area for lunch, Sarah skipped alongside Jake, chattering excitedly about her performance and asking questions about his upcoming competition. Are you nervous about tonight? She asked. Jake considered the question seriously. You know what? I'm not nervous. I'm excited. That's the first time I've felt that way about competing in months. The afternoon passed quickly. Jake spent time preparing for his own event while also enjoying Sarah's continued excitement about her victory. Other competitors and their families kept stopping by to congratulate both Sarah on her win and Jake on his coaching success. When evening came and it was time for the adult competition, the Martinez family had front row seats, with Sarah wearing her championship belt buckle and a t-shirt that Elena had quickly purchased that said, Coach's biggest fan. Jake's event was bronc riding, the same discipline where he had struggled so badly the week before. But as he prepared his equipment and went through his pre-ride routine, he felt none of the desperation and pressure that had been weighing him down recently. When his name was called and he climbed onto the bronc in the chute, Jake heard Sarah's voice clearly above the crowd noise. You've got this, Jake. Ride your own ride. It was the same advice he had given her, and hearing it back from his 8-year-old student made him smile even as he prepared for one of the most dangerous rides in rodeo. The chute gate opened, and Jake found himself on a horse that was determined to throw him off as quickly as possible. But instead of fighting the animal's movement, he found himself flowing with it, using techniques he hadn't been able to access during his recent struggles. For 8 seconds that felt like both an eternity and an instant, Jake and the bronc moved together in the violent dance that defines bronc riding. When the buzzer sounded indicating a successful ride, Jake had posted a score that would put him in serious contention for the win. As he climbed off the bronc and collected his gear, Jake could hear the Martinez family cheering wildly from the stands. But more than that, he could see Sarah jumping up and down, pointing at him and telling everyone around her, That's my coach. That's Jake. The remaining riders performed well, but when the final scores were announced, Jake had placed second overall, earning enough prize money to not only cover his expenses for the trip, but to contribute significantly to his family's ranch fund. During the awards ceremony, Jake stood on the second-place platform holding his buckle and looking out at the crowd. But his attention was focused on 3 specific faces in the stands: Miguel, Elena, and Sarah Martinez. the family who had given him far more than just a place to stay for a week. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse and the evening wound down, Jake found himself sitting on a fence rail with Sarah, just like he had been sitting alone a week ago after his disappointing performance. But everything was different now. "Jake," Sarah said, swinging her legs and holding her championship buckle in her lap. "Yeah. Will you come back and visit us? Even after you go home to Montana?" Jake looked at this remarkable little girl who had changed his life simply by noticing his disappointment and caring enough to want to help. "Sarah," he said seriously, "I'll be back. That's a promise. And next year, when you're ready for more advanced competition, maybe your parents would let me coach you again." Sarah's face lit up. "Really? You'd want to do that?" "I can't think of anything I'd rather do," Jake replied honestly. As they sat there in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the sounds and smells of the rodeo grounds, Jake realized that he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Not just his way back to competitive success, but his way back to the pure joy of the sport and the connections with people that made it meaningful. A week ago, he had been a struggling cowboy with dwindling resources and fading hope. Tonight, he was a coach, a friend, and a member of an extended family that had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Sarah had won her first competition and set an arena record. Jake had rediscovered his competitive edge and earned crucial prize money. But, more importantly, they had all learned something about the power of believing in each other and the unexpected ways that lives can intersect and change for the better. As the Martinez family packed up their gear and prepared for the drive home, Jake reflected on the chain of events that had brought them all together. It had started with a little girl's compassion for a disappointed cowboy sitting alone on a fence rail, and it had led to a moment that would change all of their lives. Sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones that get recorded in the official results. Sometimes they're the ones that happen in the heart, when strangers become family, and a moment of kindness ripples out to create something beautiful and lasting. The little girl, the cowboy, and the moment that shook everyone had become a story that would be told and retold, reminding everyone who heard it that sometimes the best things in life come from the simple act of caring about someone else's dreams as much as your own. Jake woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the distant lowing of cattle being moved to fresh pasture. For a moment, he forgot where he was, then remembered the kindness of the Martinez family and smiled. Sunlight streamed through the small window of the guest room, and he could smell coffee brewing and bacon cooking. When he emerged from the room, freshly washed and wearing his cleanest shirt, he found Elena humming softly while she cooked breakfast. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, already dressed and practically vibrating with excitement. "Good morning, Jake," Sarah called out. "Mama's making pancakes, and Papa's already out checking the cattle. But he said he'll be back soon to watch us practice roping." "Good morning, Mijo," Elena said warmly, not turning from the stove. "Coffee's fresh, and breakfast will be ready in just a few minutes." Jake accepted a steaming cup of coffee gratefully, noting that Elena had somehow figured out that he preferred it black and strong. Through the kitchen window, he could see Miguel moving among a small herd of cattle in the near pasture, his movements efficient and practiced. "Did you sleep well?" Elena asked as she flipped pancakes on the griddle. "Like a baby, ma'am. That's the most comfortable bed I've slept in since leaving home." Jake took a sip of his coffee and watched Sarah fidgeting with barely contained excitement. "Someone looks ready to learn some rope tricks." "I've been ready since I woke up," Sarah announced. "I already fed Estrella and brushed her down, and I got my rope from the barn. Papa says I'm getting pretty good, but I want to learn the fancy stuff like they do in the rodeo." Elena chuckled. "She's been up since dawn, chattering about everything she wants you to teach her. I hope you're prepared for a very enthusiastic student." Before Jake could respond, they heard the screen door slam as Miguel returned from his morning rounds. He stomped his boots clean on the porch and came into the kitchen, his work shirt already dusty despite the early hour. "Morning, Jake," Miguel said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Hope my daughter hasn't talked your ear off yet." "Not yet, but the day's still young," Jake replied with a grin that made Sarah giggle. Over breakfast, Miguel explained the layout of their ranch and pointed out the best areas for practicing roping. We've got a good flat space behind the barn where Sarah usually works with her rope. There's some old fence posts out there that make good targets. And we have some practice steers in the far pasture, Sarah added eagerly. They're really gentle, and Papa's been teaching me to rope them, but I can only catch them sometimes. Sometimes is better than never, Jake said encouragingly. I remember when I first started, I couldn't hit the broad side of a barn with a rope, let alone catch anything that was moving. After breakfast, they walked out to the practice area behind the barn. Jake was impressed with the setup Miguel had created for his daughter. There were several fence posts at varying distances, some old tires hanging from tree branches, and a clear, level space perfect for practicing different techniques. Sarah ran to get her rope, and Jake examined it with the critical eye of an experienced cowboy. It was good quality gear, well-maintained, and the right weight for a child her size. Your papa picked out a good rope for you, Jake told her when she returned, breathless with excitement. He taught me how to take care of it too, Sarah said proudly. I clean it after every practice session and hang it up properly so it doesn't get twisted. Miguel joined them, leaning against the barn wall to watch. She's been practicing almost every day for the past 2 years. Elena thinks I'm crazy, teaching an 8-year-old girl to rope, but Sarah's got real talent. Let me see what you can do first, Jake said to Sarah. Show me your basic throw. Sarah positioned herself in front of the nearest fence post, her small face serious with concentration. She built her loop with surprising skill for someone her age, and Jake found himself genuinely impressed with her form. When she threw, the rope sailed out straight and true, settling around the fence post cleanly. That's excellent, Jake said, and he meant it. Your technique is really solid. How long did it take you to get that consistent? About 6 months, Sarah said, coiling her rope with the automatic movements of someone who had done it hundreds of times. But I want to learn to rope while I'm riding Estrella, and Papa says I'm not ready for that yet. Jake looked at Miguel, who nodded. She's got the roping part down, but coordinating that with controlling a horse is a whole different skill set. I want her to be rock solid with the basics before we add that complexity. That's smart, Jake agreed. But I can show you some mounted roping techniques on foot, so you can start thinking about how it would work when you're ready to try it from horseback. For the next hour, Jake worked with Sarah on various aspects of roping. He showed her how to adjust her throw for moving targets, demonstrated some of the fancier loop builds she had seen at the rodeo, and taught her techniques for roping in windy conditions. Sarah proved to be an exceptional student, quick to pick up new concepts and determined to master each technique before moving on to the next. Jake found himself enjoying the teaching role, remembering how his own father had patiently worked with him when he was Sarah's age. Now, let's try something a little more challenging, Jake said, walking over to where Miguel had set up an old tire hanging from a rope. This simulates a moving target. The tire will swing when you hit it, so you need to time your throw for when it's at the right point in its arc. Sarah studied the swinging tire with the intensity of a much older student. She practiced the timing several times without throwing, just watching the movement and imagining where her rope needed to go. Remember, Jake coached, don't throw it where the target is now. Throw it where it's going to be when your rope gets there. On her third attempt, Sarah managed to catch the moving tire, and her whoop of excitement brought Elena out of the house to see what was happening. Look, Mama, Sarah called, still holding the rope that connected her to the captured tire. I caught it while it was moving. Elena clapped enthusiastically. That's wonderful, Mija. You're getting so good at this. Jake's the best teacher ever, Sarah announced, beaming at her new friend. He knows all kinds of tricks that Papa hasn't taught me yet. Miguel walked over to examine how Sarah had caught the tire. That's impressive, Sarah. Look at how clean that catch is. The rope went right where you wanted it. As they continued practicing, Jake noticed something that made him pause. Sarah wasn't just mechanically following his instructions. She was thinking about each technique and adapting it to her own style. She had an intuitive understanding of rope dynamics that many adult cowboys never developed. Has she ever competed? Jake asked Miguel quietly while Sarah practiced another series of throws. No, nothing formal. But there's a youth rodeo coming up next month in Lubbock. Miguel watched his daughter with obvious pride. We've been thinking about entering her in the roping events, but we weren't sure if she was ready for competition. Jake watched Sarah make 3 consecutive perfect throws at different targets. She's ready, he said definitively. More than ready. With technique like that, she could place well even against kids who have been competing for years. You really think so? Miguel asked. I know so. The hardest part of roping is developing consistent accuracy, and she's already got that. Everything else can be taught, but that natural hand-eye coordination and feel for the rope, that's something you're born with. Elena had been listening to their conversation, and she walked over with a thoughtful expression. Jake, can I ask you something? You said you're heading to Lubbock for the rodeo next weekend, right? Yes, ma'am. That's the plan, assuming I can make it work financially. Elena exchanged a meaningful look with Miguel before continuing. Well, the youth rodeo Sarah's father mentioned? That's the same weekend, at the same venue. They run the youth events on Saturday morning, and the adult competition starts Saturday evening. Jake felt a flutter of possibility. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Sarah needs someone to coach her for her first competition, Elena said carefully. And you need, well, you need people in your corner who believe in you. Miguel stepped closer to the conversation. We've been talking about this since last night, after Sarah went to bed. Elena and we think maybe God put you in our path for a reason. Not just so we could help you, but so you could help us too. Sarah, who had been practicing her throws while the adults talked, suddenly appeared at Jake's elbow. What are you all talking about? You look very serious. We're talking about the rodeo in Lubbock next weekend, Elena explained. How would you like to enter the youth competition? Sarah's eyes went wide. Really? My first real rodeo. She looked at Jake with sudden understanding. Will you be there too? I will, Jake confirmed. And if your parents agree, I'd be honored to help you get ready for the competition. But that's only 6 days away, Sarah said, her practical nature asserting itself. Is that enough time to get ready? Jake smiled at her mature question. You're already ready, Sarah. These next 6 days would just be about fine-tuning your technique and building your confidence for competition conditions. Miguel looked at his wife, and Jake could see the silent communication that passed between them. Finally, Miguel nodded. If Jake's willing to stay and help Sarah prepare, and if he thinks she's ready for competition, then I say we do it, Miguel decided. But, he continued, turning to Jake, you can't sleep in your truck and live on gas station food for the next week. You stay here, let Elena feed you properly, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. I can't ask you to do that, Jake protested. You've already done more than enough. You're not asking, Elena said firmly. We're offering. There's a difference. Sarah grabbed Jake's hand with both of hers. Please stay. Please, please, please. I promise I'll work really hard. And I'll do exactly what you tell me to do. Jake looked around at the 3 faces watching him expectantly. The Martinez family had shown him nothing but kindness since the moment Sarah first noticed his disappointment at the rodeo. They were offering him not just a place to stay, but a chance to be part of something bigger than his own struggles. All right, he said finally. I'll stay, but I'm not going to be a freeloader. I can help around the ranch, earn my keep while we get Sarah ready for competition. Deal, Miguel said, extending his hand for Jake to shake. As they shook hands, Sarah let out a cheer that startled the cattle in the nearby pasture. This is going to be the best week ever. The rest of that first day set the pattern for the days that followed. Jake worked alongside Miguel in the mornings, helping with ranch chores and learning the specific challenges of ranching in Texas. His experience with cattle and horses made him a valuable extra hand, and Miguel appreciated having someone who understood the work without needing detailed explanations. In the afternoons, Jake worked intensively with Sarah on her roping skills. They practiced different competition scenarios, worked on her form under pressure, and gradually increased the difficulty of her targets. Jake was amazed at how quickly Sarah absorbed new techniques and how determined she was to master each skill. But it wasn't just about roping. Jake also helped Sarah understand the mental aspects of competition, teaching her breathing techniques to stay calm under pressure and visualization exercises to build confidence. In competition, everyone gets nervous, Jake explained as they sat on the porch after an afternoon practice session. The difference between winning and losing usually comes down to who can manage their nerves the best. Do you still get nervous? Sarah asked. Every time, Jake admitted. The day I stop getting nervous is probably the day I should stop competing. The nerves mean you care about doing well. Elena had been listening from the kitchen doorway, and she brought out a pitcher of lemonade for all of them. How do you think Sarah will do against other kids who have been competing longer? She asked. Jake watched Sarah practice her knot tying, noting her focus and precision. Honestly, I think she's going to surprise a lot of people. She's got natural talent, and she's been learning from someone who really knows what he's doing. He nodded toward Miguel. Her basics are so solid that she's actually ahead of where most kids are when they start competing. As the week progressed, Jake found himself becoming more invested in Sarah's success than he had been in his own recent competitions. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and her rapid improvement gave him a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt since leaving Montana. But, more than that, the Martinez family had given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a sense of belonging. For the first time in months, he wasn't just struggling to survive. He was part of something meaningful, helping a talented young girl chase her dreams while finding his own motivation restored in the process. By Friday evening, Sarah was roping with the confidence and skill of someone who had been competing for years. She could hit moving targets consistently, her form was flawless, and, most importantly, she was having fun. Tomorrow's the big day, Jake said as they put away the practice equipment. How are you feeling? Excited, Sarah said immediately. And maybe a little nervous, but the good kind of nervous that you talked about. That's exactly the right attitude, Jake confirmed. You're ready for this, Sarah? More than ready. As they walked back toward the house, Sarah suddenly stopped and looked up at Jake with her serious expression. Jake, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that this has been the best week of my whole life. Even if I don't win anything, getting to learn from you and having you here with my family, it's been perfect. Jake felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. It's been pretty perfect for me too, kiddo. Your family saved me in more ways than you know. Tomorrow would bring the competition that they had all been working toward, but tonight, Jake realized that he had already won something more valuable than any prize money. He had found his way back to the joy of the sport, and he had helped a remarkable little girl prepare for her first step toward her own dreams. The question now was whether they could both rise to the occasion when it mattered most. The dust kicked up from the rodeo arena settled slowly in the warm Texas evening air. Sarah Martinez clutched her father's hand tighter as they walked through the crowds of people heading toward the parking lot. The 8-year-old girl had watched her first real rodeo that day, and her eyes still sparkled with excitement from seeing the Cowboys ride bucking broncos and rope cattle. Did you see how brave they were, Papa? Sarah asked, looking up at her father with wide brown eyes. Miguel Martinez smiled down at his daughter, remembering his own childhood fascination with the Cowboys who seemed larger than life. See, Mija. Very brave, he replied, adjusting his work-worn cowboy hat. Miguel had been working the Martinez family ranch outside of Amarillo for 15 years, ever since he married Sarah's mother, Elena. It wasn't a big spread, just enough cattle and horses to make a living, but it was theirs. As they walked past the contestant area behind the arena, Sarah noticed a tall figure sitting alone on a wooden fence rail. The man wore a black cowboy hat pulled low over his face, and his shoulders seemed to carry the weight of disappointment. But he saw the genuine concern in his daughter's eyes and decided it wouldn't hurt to be neighborly. They approached the fence slowly. The cowboy looked up as they drew near, and Miguel could see he was younger than he had first appeared, maybe in his early 20s. His face was dusty and marked with the unmistakable signs of having taken a hard fall. Evening, Miguel said with a respectful nod. The young cowboy touched the brim of his hat in return. Evening, sir. His voice carried the flat accent of the northern plains, maybe Montana or Wyoming. This is my daughter, Sarah, Miguel continued. She wanted to say hello. Sarah stepped forward, suddenly, feeling shy but determined to follow through with her impulse. Hi, I saw you riding tonight. You looked really brave out there. The cowboy's expression softened slightly. Thank you, miss. Though I reckon brave and smart ain't always the same thing. That bronc got the better of me tonight. What's your name? Sarah asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her shyness. Jake. Jake Morrison. He shifted on the fence rail, wincing slightly. And you're Sarah, your daddy said? Yes, sir. We have a ranch too, but It's not very big. Papa says ranching is hard work, but it's good work. Jake looked at Miguel with new interest. You ranch around here? About 20 miles north of town, Miguel replied. Cattle mostly, some horses. Nothing fancy, but it keeps us busy. I know the feeling, Jake said with the first hint of a smile they had seen from him. I helped my family run a place up in Montana. Came down here hoping to make some prize money to help with expenses back home. Did you win anything tonight? Sarah asked innocently. Jake's smile faded. No, ma'am. Got bucked off in about 3 seconds. That's not nearly long enough to qualify for prize money. Sarah's face scrunched up in thought. But you got back up, right? Papa always says getting back up is the most important part. Your papa's a smart man, Jake said, looking at Miguel with respect. Yeah, I got back up, though I'm not sure my ribs appreciated it much. Are you hurt bad? Sarah asked with concern. Nothing that won't heal, Jake assured her. Been thrown before, I'll get thrown again. That's just part of the game. Miguel studied the young man's gear and the way he carried himself. He had the look of someone who knew his way around horses and cattle, but there was something about his situation that suggested he was far from home with limited resources. You got a place to stay tonight? Miguel asked casually. Jake hesitated. I'll figure something out. Maybe sleep in my truck if I need to. Sarah looked up at her father with an expression that Miguel knew well. It was the same look she got when she found a stray cat or an injured bird. Elena always said Sarah had inherited her grandmother's soft heart for anyone or anything that needed help. Papa, Sarah said quietly, but not so quietly that Jake couldn't hear. Remember what Mama always says about helping people when we can? Miguel felt a familiar warmth in his chest. Elena did always say that, and she had raised their daughter to believe that kindness was never wasted, even when times were tough. Son, Miguel said to Jake, we've got a guest room at our place, and Elena always makes too much food anyway. You're welcome to stay the night. Get cleaned up. Maybe let those ribs heal a bit before you hit the road again. Jake's eyes widened slightly. That's mighty generous of you, sir, but I couldn't impose on your family like that. It's not imposing if we're offering, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Besides, Mama will want to hear all about the rodeo, and you can tell her better than we can since you were actually in it. Jake looked between the father and daughter, clearly moved by their kindness. Well, if you're sure it wouldn't be too much trouble, says the good Lord puts people in our path for a reason. I appreciate this more than you know, Jake said. It's been a long road getting down here, and it's going to be an even longer road getting back home with empty pockets. Sometimes the best prizes aren't the ones you can put in your pocket, Miguel said as they reached the truck. Sarah was already climbing into the middle of the bench seat, leaving room for Jake by the passenger door. Jake, wait until you meet Mama. She makes the best enchiladas in all of Texas, and she'll probably want to hear every single detail about your ride tonight. As they drove through the gathering dusk toward the Martinez Ranch, Sarah kept up a steady stream of questions about Montana and Jake's family ranch. Miguel listened with one ear while keeping the other on the road, but he couldn't help noticing how Jake's voice grew warmer as he talked about his home and his family. We've got about 200 head of cattle, Jake was saying, and my dad and I work the ranch with my younger brother, Tommy. It's beautiful country, but the winters are hard, and this year the feed prices have been brutal. Is that why you came down here to ride? Sarah asked with the directness that only children possess. Jake nodded. Prize money from rodeo can help keep a ranch afloat when times get tough. A good cowboy can make enough in a season to carry his family through the lean months. But you didn't win tonight, Sarah observed without judgment. No, ma'am, I sure didn't. But there's always tomorrow, and there's another rodeo next weekend over in Lubbock. Miguel pulled into the long gravel driveway that led to their modest ranch house. The porch light was on, and they could see Elena's silhouette in the kitchen window. The house wasn't fancy, but it was well-maintained and surrounded by the fenced pastures where their cattle grazed. Home sweet home, Sarah announced as they parked near the front porch. Elena emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Miguel had warned her by phone that they might be bringing a guest home, so she wasn't surprised to see Jake climbing out of the truck. You must be the cowboy Miguel told me about, Elena said warmly, extending her hand to Jake. I'm Elena Martinez, and you're very welcome here. Jake Morrison, ma'am, Jake replied, removing his hat and shaking her hand respectfully. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your hospitality. Nonsense, Elena waved away his thanks. Sarah's been talking my ear off about the rodeo all week. I'm sure you have some stories that will put our little girl's eyes to sleep tonight. As they walked toward the house, the scent of cooking food drifted out through the open windows. Jake realized he hadn't eaten since breakfast, having been too nervous about his ride to manage lunch. His stomach growled audibly, causing Sarah to giggle. See? I told you Mama makes too much food, she said happily. The Martinez home was exactly what Jake had expected from this kind family. The furniture was simple but comfortable, and family photos covered the walls. There were pictures of Sarah at various ages, often with horses or cattle in the background. The living room had a well-used feel that spoke of a family that actually lived in their space rather than just displaying it. Why don't you get washed up? Elena suggested, pointing toward a hallway. The bathroom's the second door on the right. Dinner will be ready in about 10 minutes. Jake gratefully accepted the offer to clean up. When he looked in the bathroom mirror, he understood why the Martinez family had shown such concern. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, and there was a purple bruise forming along his left cheekbone where he had hit the ground. As he washed the dust and disappointment of the day away, Jake could hear the family moving around the house, Sarah's excited chatter mixing with her parents' quiet conversation in Spanish. The normalcy of it all made him suddenly homesick for his own family's ranch in Montana. When he emerged from the bathroom, feeling more human, Elena was setting an extra place at the kitchen table. The simple wooden table was already laden with more food than Jake had seen in one place in weeks. There were enchiladas, as Sarah had promised, along with rice, beans, fresh tortillas, and a salad made with vegetables that Jake suspected came from Elena's own garden. This is incredible, Jake said as they sat down to eat. You really didn't need to go to all this trouble. It's no trouble, Elena replied, serving him a generous portion. We're just happy to have company. Sarah's been practicing her roping all week, getting ready to show off for a real cowboy. Sarah beamed at this, and throughout dinner she peppered Jake with questions about different roping techniques and horse training methods. Jake found himself relaxing for the first time in days, enjoying the warm family atmosphere and the excellent food. So what's your plan from here? Miguel asked as Elena served homemade flan for dessert. Jake's expression grew more serious. Well, I've got enough gas money to get to Lubbock for the rodeo next weekend. If I can place there, I might be able to make it to a couple more before I head home. And if you don't place? Elena asked gently. Jake shrugged, trying to appear more confident than he felt. Then, I guess I head home, and hope we can figure out another way to keep the ranch running. The adults fell quiet, understanding the weight of Jake's situation. Ranch families knew how quickly things could go from manageable to desperate when the margins were already thin. Can you show me some rope tricks tomorrow morning? Sarah asked, either oblivious to or deliberately changing the heavy mood. Sarah, Elena chided gently. Jake probably needs to get back on the road early. Actually, Jake said, looking at Sarah's hopeful face, I don't need to leave until later in the day. I'd be happy to show you a few things, if your parents don't mind. Sarah looked pleadingly at her father, who nodded with a smile. Just promise me you'll be careful, Mija. Ropes can be dangerous if you're not paying attention. I promise, Papa, Sarah said, bouncing slightly in her chair with excitement. After dinner, they moved to the living room where Sarah showed Jake her school pictures and told him about her horse, Estrella. Miguel and Elena shared stories about their own ranch, and Jake found himself opening up about his family's struggles with feed costs and equipment repairs. It's the same everywhere these days, Miguel said sympathetically. Small ranchers are getting squeezed from both ends. Feed costs going up, cattle prices staying flat. That's exactly it, Jake agreed. My dad's been ranching for 30 years, and he says this is the toughest stretch he's ever seen. As the evening wound down, Elena showed Jake to the guest room, which was small but comfortable with a handmade quilt on the bed and family photographs on the dresser. I put out some clean towels, Elena said, and there's extra blankets in the closet if you get cold. We eat breakfast around 7, if you'd like to join us. Thank you again, Mrs. Martinez, Jake said sincerely. I don't know what I did to deserve meeting your family today, but I'm grateful for it. Elena smiled warmly. Sometimes we all need a reminder that there are still good people in the world. Sleep well, Mijo. As Jake settled into the comfortable bed, he could hear the family's quiet voices in other parts of the house as they went through their evening routine. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than worry and disappointment. The Martinez family had shown him kindness without expecting anything in return, and their daughter's innocent questions had reminded him why he had started riding rodeo in the first place. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But tonight, he was safe and warm in the guest room of a ranch house in Texas, and that was more than he had dared hope for when he was sitting alone on that fence rail just a few hours earlier. Outside his window, he could hear the gentle sounds of cattle settling in for the night, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. It was the same kind of night sounds he heard at home in Montana, and they helped ease the homesickness that had been his constant companion since leaving his family's ranch. Jake drifted off to sleep thinking about Sarah's excited plans for the morning and wondering what tomorrow might bring. He had no way of knowing that the next day would change not only his own life, but the lives of the Martinez family as well, in ways that none of them could have imagined.